Welcome everybody to the MMA EMEA Webinar Series. There is no new normal. We're running these every Wednesday about this time. So welcome to today's session. My name is Chris Babiotti. Welcome everybody to the MMA EMEA Webinar Series. There is no new normal. We're running these every Wednesday about this time. So welcome to today's session. My name is Chris Babiotti, and I'm the Managing Director of the MMA across EMEA. And it's my pleasure to be working with you today and sharing this webinar with you. Every Wednesday about this time. So welcome to today's session. Let me tell you a little bit about the MMA, who we are, who we serve, and what we're all about for those of you not familiar with us. As you can see on the slides here, we have a number of core chief marketer officers who are members and their companies of the MMA. And our purpose is to enable marketers to drive innovation and enduring business value in this increasingly dynamic and mobile connected world. And you'll see in front of you now a number of the companies that are members of our organization, be they marketers, be they agencies, be they technology enablers. And those people who are members of our organization are fortunate to be able to continue to sort of learn, gather unique insights, network, and make business connections across the whole mobile ecosystem. But a lot of what we do is really about working with the industry to shape the future of marketing. So without further ado, let's move on to the video and give you a bit of an insight into the MMA. And today's particular webinar is focused on what is becoming and what is a very, very difficult subject that's affecting us all. It's iOS14 and what we need to know. And it's my pleasure to introduce our industry leading speaker today, Ben from AppsFlyer, who will take us through a 30-40 minute presentation around everything you need to know around IDFA and iOS 14. Welcome, Ben, and we look forward to hearing everything you've got to say. Over to you.
Thank you, Chris. It's my pleasure to be here today. I thought that video was pretty moving, sad, but it is the reality that we're all facing. And I think it's fair to say that 2020 has been challenging, a really challenging year for pretty much everyone, both personally as well as professionally. And it's often not failed to surprise us, and unfortunately, rarely surprises in a good way. So I'll give you an example. Just June arrived, and just as it arrived, we were all hoping for some normality, a little bit of summer sun, and then Apple held its worldwide developer conference, and it announced that it would be de facto deprecating the unique identifier that mobile marketers use for campaign measurement. It's known as the IDFA, and it was going to do that when Apple rolls out iOS 14. Now, this wasn't a massive surprise. Apple has made privacy a central pillar of its marketing strategy for several years. And Apple weren't shy when advertising this message. As you can see here, they took out a 15-story billboard to troll one of their biggest rivals at the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas just last year. Apple's clear message to consumers and the industry is that the iPhone is the platform for users that value privacy. And I must tell you that on my way to work this morning, I live in Berlin, and the whole city was plastered with Apple privacy advertising. And yeah, they're really vocal about this. So, and of course, this has long been speculated about. Industry experts, because of the privacy features that they've been, the privacy messages and the features that they've been alluding to, that they would eventually incorporate the device identification for advertisers that we spoke to. The technical term for this is the IDFA, as mentioned. It's the identifier for advertisers. And it's a unique identifier that is used to differentiate one device from the next. It is, of course, an anonymous identifier, but it is still used extensively to report on user behavior and enable tactics such as retargeting. Now, as I said, none of this was a massive shock. It had been telegraphed by Apple and speculated by industry for some time. What was a shock, however, was that they gave the industry less than 3 months to react and prepare. Apple's annual developer conference took place only in the 3rd week of June, and iOS 14 was launched 2 weeks ago on September 16th. There were a few other surprises in there, but we'll get to that. Now, thankfully, following discussions with the industry, Apple decided to postpone the rollout of its new app tracking transparency framework. This is the bit ATT, also referred to, it's referred to as ATT, which I'll talk about a bit later in this presentation. But they wanted to give the industry more time to prepare for the change and to listen to suggestions as to how this change might be implemented in such a way as to respect user privacy while also enabling robust campaign measurement. Something that is absolutely critical, not only for advertisers, but also for the consumers if services are to remain affordable and personalized. So to be specific, Apple announced that it's postponing the rollout of the app tracking transparency framework until early 2021. When precisely is still unknown. Thankfully, we at AppsFlyer have long since taken our customer data security and the customers' right to expect that their data is handled with the utmost care and attention very seriously. And our industry-leading credentials demonstrate this. Furthermore, we welcome Apple's decision. We welcome its decision to continue to develop an ecosystem that fosters trust between the consumer and the advertiser. And we also welcome Apple's decision to delay the rollout of the IDFA deprecation so that the industry can properly prepare. As our CEO, Oren Kaniel, stated recently, it's the right thing to do. The fuel that powers the marketing and advertising industry is trust. And it is in everyone's best interest that consumers trust how brands and technology players collect and use data. So that said, it's also important that the changes happen in an orderly and considered fashion. And thankfully, Apple has now recognized that. So that was the background for today's discussion. We'll now take a look at the precise details of what is actually happening, the knowns. We'll then take a look at some of the remaining uncertainties, and we will finish with some thoughts on what we can all be doing in the coming months to prepare for this change. And we'll leave plenty of time at the end to answer your questions. So please feel free at any point to submit them, and we'll do our best to get to as many as possible. And before we start, just a quick intro about AppsFlyer, and given that we like data, here are some numbers. I am continuously impressed with the bottom row, the 1 trillion events measured per month. It's just a mind-boggling number. Also a bit about myself. I'm Ben, and I was fortunate enough to be given the task of opening AppsFlyer's Berlin office back in 2016, and have since assembled what I believe is an amazing group of talented and fun people. And we serve the Central European region. So, what has happened? The knowns, let's get into it. So we have, as I mentioned, Apple was ramping up its privacy messaging back in 2019. Then speculation, in the beginning of 2020, speculation intensified about the pending deprecation of the IDFA on iOS14. And it was actually believed that it would be just a full-on deprecation. In June of this year, Apple announced the App Tracking Transparency Framework at WWDC, which was not, as I mentioned, a full-on deprecation of IDFA, but something that is a de facto, what we believe a de facto deprecation. In September, on September 3rd, Apple announced that it will postpone the rollout of ATT. And then just 2 weeks ago, September 16th, Apple launches iOS 14. And as we mentioned, in early 2021, next year, Apple will roll out the ATT. We don't know exactly when, but the initial announcement was early 2021. Okay. So now we understand the timeframes. Let's take a look at the technicals. Here we must start by understanding the fundamental principles of how Apple views privacy. This advert sums it up perfectly. Apple's, its product, brand, and technology is now synonymous with user privacy. Apple's perspective is that privacy is a fundamental human right. It has incorporated this into its core company values. And it basically what it's trying to make sure is that the end user controls their own data. And as I said earlier, we believe exactly the same. Privacy and security has long been one of our 4 company values. So how is Apple actioning this principle in practice? So what does it mean for the user experience, and what are the implications for advertisers? Well, with iOS14, there's a host of new functionality that give the consumer greater control of their data. And this includes contact sharing and photo gallery sharing, both permission changes to the permission structure, which I think makes a lot of sense. So if you look at the contact access permissions, users will be able to share a specific contact with an app instead of sharing all contacts. And that does make perfect sense. But it also requires some changes and some development work, and it might impact functionality when it comes to user invites and referrals, something to consider. On the photo access permission side, here in the same way, users will be able to just share one photo instead of the entire photo library. And when it comes to IDFA opt-in, as we spoke about earlier, Apple has announced the App Tracking Transparency Framework, and this means that app developers need to ask for permission using a specific consent messaging, which is shown here, and I will show it down the line again. And this is something that is, if an app wants to access the IDFA, they will have to use this consent form and this consent messaging, and otherwise IDFAs will be 0 for the app developer. And they need to make do without it. So as soon as you want, as an app owner, want to access the IDFA of a device, you need to ask for permission in this way. So what's the impact? If we look at attribution in the first instance, then it is clear that it will be fundamentally changed. What before IDFA was the single identifier that was used in marketing attribution, and as we mentioned, we believe that the coverage will be very, very limited, and therefore granularity for IDFA and user level attribution will be limited. And probabilistic modeling will be critical to provide a more comprehensive picture. When you think about your audience, so given that fewer people will be opting into IDFA tracking, as Apple calls it, your remarketing efforts will be challenged, because as the industry right now is set up to retarget users based on IDFA, and you will very likely have limited access to this, there needs to be a rethinking of how this can be done. And therefore, like, your audiences might be just simply too small to do lookalike targeting and so on. When it comes to deferred deep linking, I'll just explain briefly what that means. Deep linking is sending a user with one link from one page or from one app to another, but not just to the opening page, but deeply into a specific section of the app. And deferred deep linking is when in between that flow there is an app download. So let's say you have a website and you are showing a shoe or a specific news article, and then you want to send the user to that news article within the app. If the user doesn't have the app, then deferred deep linking can be used. If the user does have the app, then it would be just a simple deep link to the app and to that specific article. And now without the IDFA, deep linking works without IDFA, so that's not impacted. But if the user doesn't have the app, which is called deferred deep linking, then we will have a scenario where probabilistic modeling needs to come into place. And we assume and we think there will be much more web to app, owned media channels, that type of user flow in order to ensure that you still provide very good user experience. But I'll get to more later. Let me get to this. Okay, so let's look at some of the unknowns. For those of you who are not familiar, there's a useful planning and risk analysis matrix called known unknown matrix. It helps to identify areas of certainty, areas of uncertainty that we at least are aware of, and of course areas of future risk or uncertainty that may be completely blind spots, or simply parts of knowledge that we struggle to surface and rationalize consciously. So we've spoken about the known knowns, the things that can be pretty sure of. So let's have a think about some of the less certain aspects of iOS 14 and ATT. Firstly, there's still a question mark of how many users will opt in to accept app tracking and sharing of their IDFA. Given current mandated language, which you can see here, we might expect extremely low opt-in rates because this language seems to me quite intimidating. But I'm giving you one caveat here, is that when cookie opt-in was brought into web, similarly low opt-in rates were expected, And the reality, as you are aware of, probably is very different. There might be some softening of the language, or there's other ways that this can be mitigated, but we'll get to that also in a second. Secondly, all that Apple has said so far is that it will postpone the rollout of ATT until early 2021. It would be pointless to speculate on what exactly that means, but I believe what we can take great comfort in that the industry has been given at least 3 months more to prepare, and I think Apple did this in order to consult further with the industry, and therefore we can assume that it is likely Apple will only roll out ATT when the industry is properly prepared. In the meantime, players such as ourselves or major advertisers like you and industry bodies like the MMA and the major media owners such as Facebook, Google, and others have the ability to work together with Apple to make sure that the eventual solution is positive for the industry and the consumer, really importantly, and not as disruptive as it might have been if it had been launched 2 weeks ago. Finally, 3 months since Apple announced this change, there has been significant innovation. In early September, we launched our own SKAdNetwork data simulation dashboard, so that advertisers could start to understand what data would be available to them for campaign analysis. Just briefly about SKAdNetwork. This is the solution that Apple announced as as a subsidy to current measurement gaps that break away with the loss of IDFA. But the SKAdNetwork has its limitations, and essentially we needed to step up and develop a solution that really enables advertisers to work with it effectively. Our SDK can already handle large amount of the functionality on behalf of the developer. Pretty much everything that an app developer was going to have to do manually themselves at great time and effort is now handled automatically by our solution, and that was accomplished in less than 3 months. When we think about, we have another 3 months as an industry, and maybe 6 or longer, 9 months before the rollout, there will be plenty more innovation that should smoothen this transition. So we are optimistic. Okay, so we talked a bit about what we know and what remains to be seen from the key variables that are in play. We're now into much more challenging territory. We're trying to understand what we don't know, that we might be able to prepare for and figure out. The unknown knowns. So when we think about how we might prepare for what is fairly a major change to our industry, where there are still so many unknown variables, the right approach is to test and learn. This process should bring to the surface some of the tacit knowledge that we have the ability to know, even if we aren't consciously aware of it at the very start of the process. So let's look at some practical ways that app developers can start to test and learn new methods of measuring campaign success. Measuring campaign success, increasing opt-in rates, and developing new ways of identifying the characteristics of high-value users. Because that's what we're all here for. Now, if there's one thing that any app developer can do to reassure a user to respect their right to data privacy, it is to do what's called permission priming. If you have ever opened an app that immediately asks for your location, contacts, and camera access without any pre-justification, you will understand how awkward that experience is. While you must ask the end user for permission to access DFA, as you can see here in step 2, there's nothing stopping you from adding a stage before that explains how you will use their data, and to offer reassurance that it will not be shared in any way that they're not aware of. So this is definitely something to do. Furthermore, you should consider the timing of the ask, not just the priming. Priming might also include delivering value and engagement to the end user by allowing them to access your service without first asking for permission. So there are pros and cons to this approach. On the positive side, opt-in rates may well increase. But if you rely on early retargeting to retain new users, you may harm your ability to do this. So again, this is all stuff we can test and learn so that we can build data to adapt to the new reality. Another option that warrants exploration is to extend the pre-install journey. I alluded to this earlier, but here we'll go into a bit more detail. So the perceived wisdom that the amount of steps and clicks a user must go through, the better, is being tested here. But we believe for good reason. By leveraging deep linking, such as our one-link product, as well as our smart banners, which were built for mobile web environments, it is possible to create deterministic attribution outcomes. So while there are more clicks, there's also more opportunity to sell value and educate the customers through this journey. So once again, now is the time to test and learn to understand how the tools that are already made available might help us in this new world. So we've seen a number of ways that app developers can leverage tools. They already should have these in their bags, and this should enable them to increase opt-in rates and deliver new and potentially more engaging user experiences. As before, the only way we can develop a better understanding of these unknown knowns is to test and learn. A principle that is characteristic to all the most successful app developers. So this brings us to the unknown unknowns, which is undoubtedly the most challenging area of risk mitigation for any business. So I'd like to finish off where we started by looking at what we have learned this year. We've we've learned that the new normal is no normal. The new normal is change and inconsistency, and we can be fairly confident that it will remain this way for a while. So with the perspective of time, I believe we'll be able to look back at this year and realize that we learned a lot, and that as an industry, we're much stronger as a result. And so let's, before we finish off and move into Q&A, let's take one more look at the many positives that we can take from this year. So number one, talking about growth and new audience segments. So mobile has experienced one of its most significant growth periods in history. We acknowledged at the beginning what we understand, that there's some very unique and challenging circumstances that have driven this growth. But we feel that we shouldn't be ashamed of this growth, as I guess the services we provided by the mobile industry have been absolutely essential in helping people get through the toughest year in decades. So this is evidenced by the many new segments that have come into the market. Think about elderly people and so on. So many of those have previously not engaged with many services on mobile, but hopefully we've all done enough to convince them to stick around for the long term. Two, increased frequency and value. So among those who were already loyal mobile users, we've seen huge increases in usage and in value. I guess this is evidenced by the constant stream of parcels that are being delivered to our front doors on a daily basis. I can tell you, my wife has definitely increased the ordering. Thirdly, and particularly relevant to today's topic, and some of the recommendations I've made in the previous slides, is that many brands have had significant accelerated their digital transformation programs. They did this to engage with consumers on web and mobile app environments. While some have struggled, it's encouraging that we go into Q4 holiday season and 2021 in a much stronger position as an industry so that we can deliver excellent digital user experiences, and it should help us beyond these challenging times, just to adapt to rapid change. And lastly, and probably most importantly, when we think about where we go from here and how we cope with unknown unknowns, which are on the horizon, it's the recognition that while 2020 may have been a huge challenge, let's be honest, it has been. It might have been even painful to some extent. We've come out of it infinitely more resilient, agile, capable, and hopefully innovative than we've ever been. I can tell you that at AppsFlyer, we're now a 1,000 people company, and in the last 3 months, we behaved like a young startup that just sprinted through product development. And in these qualities will no doubt help us to adapt to the new normal, anything from iOS or any other other changes that will be thrown our way, and I believe that is definitely something positive to take out from this year. So potentially we'll one day go back to our App Store review and change the rating, but only time will tell. So I thank you for your attention and sticking with me. And now I'm opening this up to any of your questions that you may have.
Thanks, Ben. That was really helpful. Your insights in trying to and in simplifying what is quite a complex subject. So, and I can see here from the questions that we've got from a number of different people, you've obviously sparked an interest and the like. So, without further ado, let's get into the questions. Anybody on the call now listening in, feel free. We've got time now still for some more questions, but let's kick off with one. I'm just going to kick off one with actually from myself, Ben, actually, because one of the things we've got out in the marketplace at the moment at the MMA, we're asking the industry about the sort of state of readiness. You know, are they aware of what's coming? And how ready are they and the like? And your presentation and what you guys at AppsFly are doing are obviously trying to educate and learn and give insights and get people ready, like you said, in the steps that they should take. So the question I've got is that we haven't got any data back yet, but I'd be really fascinated to hear, have you got any sense of the readiness that your current clients and customers are in terms of this whole issue?
So I don't have an official survey that we've conducted, but
right.
I know that our customer success team has been literally all they've been doing the last 3 months was just speaking to our clients constantly on the phone, in email conversations and video meetings to help our clients as much as possible and get them ready. So there is an understanding that things are changing, that things need to be done, and people are. You know what? The challenge was that initially there was a bit of a waiting game. There were a lot of uncertainties, and as time progressed, we were able to shed some light on that, as well as develop products to cope with this new normal. And then it was a matter of educating about the product and the possibilities in the post-ATT world.
Right.
But I believe that the percentage of our clients that are ready is quite high.
Right. Okay. Well, that's great. Thanks for that. And it was just a general sense or a feel that you had. But that leads to another question from one of our attendees. So they're asking, is there a guidance report that advertisers can access and get prepared for IDFA?
Sure. Yeah. So we have prepared an iOS14 guide and what you can do and can't do. I'm happy to share that with you, and then we can send that round to everyone who's listened in or wants to listen in. Definitely.
Great. Yeah. I think what we normally do, Ben, is that if we maybe publish that on our website at the moment, and then people can be directed to it. And I think, as I say, talking to the audience here, if there are some complexities or some individual questions you'd like to privately ask Ben, directly, then feel free to do that as well, because I think some people sometimes have a sort of fear of, if they ask a question, is it appropriate, or is it silly, or should I know this? So no fear, no. just ask Ben privately if you want to do that. Okay, Ben, I've got another one here. We're just moving on to Android a bit here. So this is what it says. It says, outlook for the Android world. Is it likely to follow or not? Do you have an opinion or view on that?
So very difficult. It's very difficult to tell the future, and if we've learned from 2020 that predicting what's going to happen is very, very hard. I like I like hindsight much better than
right.
looking forward. But I can tell you that Android or Google do take user privacy very seriously as well. Apple is very aggressive in their messaging when it comes to privacy, but Google as a company, as well as Android as a platform, also enables a lot of privacy for users. I do believe that there might be some enhancements, and continuously both platforms are developing and are improving. And so I believe that Android will follow. I do believe, however, that Google is a fundamentally different company. They have a lot of advertising revenue, and therefore they understand the value and the importance of providing measurement and granularity in measurement. And so I hope that in their approach, they will be much more open and friendly to marketers, as well as respecting user privacy. Because I strongly believe that we as an industry should care deeply about end users and their privacy, and essentially they're paying for everything that we're doing, and we want to respect that. However, we need to make sure that we can appropriately advertise so that the services are relevant, that some of them stay free and affordable if they're advertising funded. And so it is in the interest of end users, and that's really where the focus should always lie, to make marketing measurement possible and enable it. And I hope that Google will, I believe that Google will always have that in mind. And Apple is moving in that direction, as we've seen. So they're owning things and hopefully enhancing the ability to measure.
Yeah, and that leads us, thanks for that, Ben. That leads us on to the next question that we've got here, which again is a bit of an opinion piece. But anyway, I think people are asking you as the expert, in your opinion, what will be the effect of IDFA regulation on mobile advertising spend?
Yeah.
I'm sure there's not a percentage up or down here. It's just like, what's your sense of where that might be heading based on the regulation?
So we've seen Facebook announce that they will completely drop IDFA collection, and they believe that given that on their own products, the impact will be less dramatic, but the Facebook audience network, which allows advertisers to essentially extend their reach beyond Facebook products onto other apps, relies heavily on the IDFA as it stands currently. And in a post-IDFA world, and given that Facebook has currently made the decision to drop IDFA collection, they have announced that they see revenues for publishers drop by 50%. And there's actually data by Google that goes into the same kind of is in the same kind of spheres. And so if there's no IDFA and targeting is made very difficult, then I think it will have a significant impact on advertising revenues, as well as therefore then the flip side on the spend. And it will take time to recover, obviously.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thanks for that. We're going to move into another area. We've got another 2 or 3 minutes. So if anybody else wants to ask a question from the audience, then please do feel free. But let's move on to the next one we've got here, which is this. So what do you see is the potential of app clips, and how do you think advertisers can leverage them post iOS 14?
Yeah, app clips is a very interesting, cool product that Apple did with iOS 14. So iOS 14 and Apple in general, it wasn't only destructive to marketing. There, as I mentioned earlier, there was some good innovation on the privacy side of things, but also in general operating system-wide changes. And one of these new products, essentially, that came out of it was App Clips. This is a mini version of an app that is that can be invoked by scanning a QR code or I think a geolocation and a few other methods. And it will, an example of a use case would be you walk into your coffee shop and you scan a QR code at the cashier, and instead of having to download the entire app of this coffee shop chain, for example, you will have a limited version, and you can order your coffee with a few clicks and use Apple Pay, obviously, to make that purchase. And so the potentials for use cases is huge. Just think about all the times when you think, actually, I don't want to download the entire app, because I just need it for this one time, and then I don't want to give it, I don't know, screen real estate, and I don't need thousands of apps. Mm-hmm. And App Clips is one solution that Apple has come up with that enables some kind of a lightweight app, something in between opening a website and the app. And I think that there are very good use cases, and we think that adoption, like a lot of developers will look into it and will release so-called app clips. And we actually have reports on how people can make use of that, and we hope to be able to measure those attributes here as well.
Yeah, great. Well, thanks for that, Ben. I think, as I say, it's making a complex subject, giving some pointers as to what people, advertisers, agencies, everybody involved, app developers should be doing is great. The guidance report, I think, will be a great follow-up. So let's do that. And everybody listening in, by all means, you can contact us at the MMA here, or visit our website, and we'll make sure we connect either directly to Ben or to the AppsFlyer team, or obviously you can download the report and take it further from there. So it beholds me, as we come to the last few minutes of our hour, which has just flown by, is to thank Ben for today's presentation. I think we are definitely recording this particular webinar, as we do most of ours. Again, we will publish that onto our website. Each and every one of you listening in, whether through live streaming or through this platform, we will send you a follow-up thank you email, and on there will be some information around AppsFlyer that, again, you can download and that you can use. As I said at the beginning, every Wednesday we run this webinar, the MMA EMEA There Is No New Normal. And next week we have a further webinar where we move actually into the world of AI. We're looking at customer journey optimization and leveraging of AI. And we've got some case studies here of how some marketers in the financial segment and how some marketers have used AI to help them in this particular crisis point. So please do tune in for that same time next Wednesday, October the 7th. So it beholds to me to then say thank you all very much for attending, for your time. if you'd like to nominate a senior executive to potentially participate in these webinars, then do let Gabby Custis, there's an email you can see, Gabby from our team, know. And if you'd like to know more about the MMA, do reach out to her as well, and we'll connect everybody within that. So once again, thank you for attending. Thank you, Ben, for the presentation that you've just given us. We've got the guidance report that we said before that we will love to share. So until then, we'll see you next week. Thank you all very much for attending. We look forward to welcoming the next one and to our future podcasts. So for now, goodbye. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day. And most importantly, stay safe. Bye now.
Yeah. Thanks.